All right, folks, hello and welcome back to Online English Class. I hope you guys are doing well today. Today is Tuesday, April 21st, and today we're going to be working on our OTN number 4, which is going to be analyzing Part 2, Chapters 1 through 3 of 1984, all right, which you should have already read. But before we do that, let's go ahead and review the top of the week announcements briefly. All right. So remember your new discussion grade procedure. All right. You need to every day in the comment section of the YouTube video leave a question, a summary, or a reflection. Okay. The quality and authenticity of your engagement there will be how I develop your discussion grade for the unit. Okay. Yesterday, I needed email confirmation of your reading for Part 2, Chapters 1 through 6. Throughout the rest of this week, you need to be finishing Part 2 of 1984, all right? And you need to complete your OTNs as we complete them in class, okay? So yesterday, in Monday's class, we completed OTN 3, which concluded our analysis of Part 1 of 1984. So today, you need to begin OTN 4. Make sure your OTNs are up to date and that you're keeping up with those on a daily basis. Aside from all this, you need to make sure that you are working on your quarter 4 essay. Okay, we're going to talk more about the quarter 4 essay and strategies for completing that effectively and well in the future. For now, we're focused primarily on getting through 1984, working on our reading skills, making sure that we read this complicated novel well and engage with the ideas that it has to offer. Okay. We're going to be talking more specifically on how to write this essay effectively in the future. Okay, so stay posted on that. Make sure that is on your front burner. All right. So our fourth OTN analyzes Part 2, Chapters 1 through 3. Here in the center of the slide, we've got a picture from one of the movie renderings of 1984. In which Winston and Julia are together in the Golden Country. Okay, so one of the most important sort of themes or major ideas that is explored in Part 2 is the ways in which Winston begins to expand his rebellion from something that is true only in his own mind and only in his own private personal heart, and begin the process of sharing that both with another individual and, as he hopes, eventually with his society at large, okay? Hence his joining of the Brotherhood, his reading of the book, his relationship with O'Brien. All of these things are attempts to expand Winston's rebellion, all right? So before we analyze these pieces of the text in chapters 1 through 3, we just need to conduct an SQ3R for the text that's under our consideration. And what basically those pieces of text are going to do is help develop the significance of Winston's rebellion against the totalitarian control of the party. All right, so without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump through our SQ3R for this section of text. All right, in my notes, I've got my OTN labeled OTN 4, Part 2, Chapters 1 through 3. All right, the speaker of the text, as we always want to survey who's talking in any one piece of writing that we're studying, is obviously something we've already established. Okay, the third person omniscient narrator. Know more about that for now. Okay, the genre or the style of the text is dystopian fiction. Now, we do want to come to some concluding thoughts now that we have completed Part 1 with Orwell's general depiction of the dystopia that he offers to us in the first part of 1984, okay? So unless we're attempting to unpack, right, what Orwell is presenting to us as the worst possible world, okay, for a human being to live in, we're going to miss out, all right, what he is suggesting to us would be a good possible world, or what it means to be human on some of the most basic and existential levels, all right? Because this environment is something that takes that from a human being, or at least recreates or remorphs them, okay? So to summarize the dominant impressions of Part 1, which are basically two things, okay? Again, if we were in class, I would ask you these questions and make sure you understood these things. But since we're not, you just need to listen, right? There's two kind of dominant impressions. Number one, right, Orwell depicts a dystopian environment, right? It is our job to understand what exactly is so terrible about that environment, right? Oceania is not a dystopia because everyone doesn't get a dozen donuts a day, right? Uh, uh, Oceania is a dystopia because it is an environment that is crushing and dehumanizing. Well, how exactly is it so? All right, well, Oceania's society, governed by the party, exerts totalitarian control over the external, all right, so that's bad, okay, the external parts of its citizens' life, and worse yet, all right, the internal elements of their citizens' lives, okay? So the party controls its citizens' hatreds, as we saw in part one, and also their loves, and their notions of truth, what is real, all right, what is true, and, all right, what is false, right? What is not true? What is insane? Okay, the party controls these things, as opposed to a sane and humane world in which individuals develop hatreds and loves and notions of truth and falsehood, where for themselves, in their mind and in their hearts. Okay, so their citizens' abilities to reason politically, all right, so to think about what their society should look like, politically speaking, okay, and also personally to think and reason about their own personal beliefs and their own personal actions are destroyed. All right, by who? Well, by the party, but what does the party use? Well, the citizens themselves, okay, as they are required to double think, which is one of those sacred principles of ENG. Okay, in other words, the party requires the citizens to participate in their own oppression, to participate in their own dehumanization. What you should be hearing is echoes of Shakespeare's depiction of both Othello and also Gulliver in part one of Gulliver's Travels. Okay, the party enlists its citizens in the process of their own oppression. Okay, so in order for the citizens to avoid thought crime, which will lead them to death, okay, and for a human mortal to do things that avoid death, all right, and minimize suffering and pain is, ready, reasonable. All right, it is unreasonable to go and bang your head on the wall until you have a concussion, right? Why? Because that leads to pain and suffering. That is instinctually unreasonable, instinctually bad. So a citizen is required to, ready, think insanely in order to, right, in order to protect their own well-being, in order to protect their existence. So their survival instinct is set against their instinct to think logically. Here the party is using elements of their citizens' humanity against, all right, against their citizens' humanity. All right, so think about those three slogans that were offered to us at the very beginning of the novel, right? The three major slogans, and that also end the first part. What are they? War is peace, okay? Freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. All right, well, how in part one has Orwell sort of developed what is exactly meant by each one of those statements? Well, for the party member, all right, they must genuinely believe that war against what? Well, war against all the enemies of Oceania on the most literal and basic level, but in a deeper sense, right? War against the self, war against one's own reasonable thinking, war against the evidence of one's own senses, and war against the compulsion, the very human compulsion to ask why, the teleological question we discussed yesterday, and to seek meaningful answers to those questions. Making war against that, fighting against that, constantly using doublethink, all right, reality control, as Winston calls it, is peace. Okay? In other words, if you're not actively at war fighting against your own instinctual compulsions to be reasonable, then if you are not at war doing this, okay, then you will not be at peace in Oceania society. In fact, you will be destroyed. You will become the enemy of the party, and you will be vaporized. You will be unpersoned. You will be written out of history and destroyed and forgotten. Okay? Furthermore, a party member must believe that freedom, all right, which Winston defines as the ability to think one's own thoughts and to believe and or know that those thoughts are true. Okay, that's what it means to be intellectually free, is to have the ability, the freedom to observe one's world, to come to one's own conclusions about what is true in that world, and then to live, behave in light of those beliefs, right? That's freedom. That's what Winston means whenever he says the essence of freedom is to be able to say that 2 + 2 = 4, and to know that that is true despite what anyone else would say, right? That is intellectual freedom, because it is the exercise of one's ability to analyze their environment, to come to rational conclusions about things that they know to be true, and then live in light of those truths. Okay? A party member must believe that that kind of freedom is actually slavery. All right? In other words, just as slavery, okay, so you can reverse it, right? Slavery is also freedom, just as freedom is slavery. So slavery to the party's sacred principles, all right, slavery to the party's doctrine, slavery to Big Brother is the only way for a member of Oceana society to maintain the freedom to exist and to walk around and to not be killed and imprisoned by the thought police, okay? Just as, right, for the party member, that they must also believe that ignorance, all right, ignorance, all right. So think of the word ignorance just as ignoring things. Okay, to be ignorant is to have ignored reality in some way, ignored knowledge, not known things that you should know. All right, to be ignorant, all right, to be ignorance, then therefore is strength. Okay, to ignore, all right, the party's insane philosophical system and self-evident hypocrisy. To ignore those things, not to conscientiously analyze them or think about them as Winston does in his journal, but to ignore those things is what it means to be a strong citizen and to have a strong society, okay, if you live in Oceana. So all three of those statements, which on the surface just do not make any sense, when applied to Oceana's insane society, actually begin to, ready, it's weird, make sense, even as they express insane kinds of concepts. Okay, we would call that a kind of paradox that the party uses in order to employ reason to destroy reason. All right, to use words to destroy words. Okay, to use philosophy to destroy philosophy, to use belief to destroy belief. Okay, and in all of those ways, all of the concepts, war, peace, freedom, slavery, ignorance, strength, they all collapse into nothingness because they are their opposite. All right. So, what about Winston, right? This is our second dominant impression of part one. Okay, so we've got that insane environment that is totally dehumanizing, that uses all of the basic elements of Oceana's citizenry against their own humanity, very similar to Iago in Othello, very similar to the ways in which the Lilliputians use Gulliver's inherent humanity against him, right? So too Winston is in a very similar situation. Right? How does Winston react? Right? Well, Winston, throughout part one, seeks to take control of his mind and his heart. He's trying to get it back. All right? But he's been under the party's control for years. Okay, for his entire life, for his entire adult life, he's been under the party's control. All right. And so after decades of being brainwashed and controlled, Winston's internal processes are counterintuitive and extremely important word here, convoluted. All right. And one of the essential basic things that's going on in Winston's thought crime is he's attempting to disentangle that convolution. He's attempting to engage in self-conscious, self-critical reflection, right? Which is not, that does not submit to the party, because it requires free thought. It requires careful meditation over one's own internal life. That is not ignorance. And therefore, that is a threat to the party's sacred principles, the party's slogans, and the party's power. So the act of journaling, okay, which is just recording his thoughts and impressions consciously, helps him analyze his own internal dissonances. Dissonance just means sounds that don't make sense together. Okay, so he's got these internal voices, internal sounds all within him that just don't match up. They're irrational, right? And he is trying to regain, very simply, his sanity. So his rebellion against Big Brother, when he writes it down in chapter 1, down with Big Brother, down with Big Brother, that's an expression of sort of clear-headed, unequivocal hatred, right, is something that hatred begins the process of his re-education, and he is sort of slowly re-educated in part 1 as he is practicing, right? He's practicing how to be free. He's practicing what it means to have a free mind, okay? So, all right, by the end of part 1, he's able to do some things that that individuals with free minds are able to do. First of all, he's able to ask a very important human question that requires critical evaluation. He's able to ask the teleological question, why? Why does the party do what they do? Not just how, right? How is an important, that's an important question, and his analysis of how is an act of self-conscious rebellion against the party. But when you ask why, okay, things get a little bit more, the stakes of the rebellion are raised, because not only is he asking how the party achieves their goals, he's asking what the goal is itself from the very beginning. What's the point? Only humans can ask that kind of question. And the answers to those questions, why, okay, typically get you to philosophical premises and basic beliefs. All right, like if I ask you, why do you go to school? All right, you might first say, well, because I have to. Okay, and then I would say, well, why do you have to? So, well, because it's the law. And I would say, well, why is it the law? You would say, well, because somebody made the law a long time ago. Okay, in like the Florida legislature. Well, why did those legislatures make that the law? Okay, well, because, right, eventually we're going to get to the fact that whoever made that rule believed that it was good for young people in a democracy to read books and count numbers in fancy and complex ways in order to help develop their minds and to help expand their own internal ability to think and reason and develop opinions about the world around them that are sane. Okay? So when we ask that question why, we get into philosophical principles. We get into ethical maxims or axioms. All right? In other words, universals or abstractions. And when we get into that realm, we are in the realm of the purely human. All right. So when Winston asked this question, it is a reflection of the extent to which he has reclaimed and recovered his humanity. Understood that? Okay. And then another important action at the end of part 1 that sort of helps embody and wrap up all the impressions made throughout part 1 is his purchase of the glass paperweight. Okay. Once again, as I stated yesterday, the glass paperweight, just quickly, is a sort of symbol of Winston's reclaimed mind and heart. Right? He comes to the conclusion that it is beautiful. Right? He analyzes it, he thinks about it, and he develops a free aesthetic evaluation of it. It is beautiful, and he puts his affection on it. He loves it. He adores it. He values it. He delights in it, and so he buys it. Right? And he keeps it. In other words, and so not only is the action indicative of Winston's freedom, it's also a kind of symbol that Winston uses, all right, and he sort of thinks of it. And also Orwell uses this glass paperweight as a symbol of Winston's reclaimed mind and heart that is protected from the party. It's ensconced, right? It's in glass. It's protected from exterior manipulation, right? And it's capable of being analyzed and understood by him, right, as he sort of gazes through the transparent glass into this, quote, convoluted little heart-like structure in the middle of the paperweight. Okay, so by the end of part one, to put it very simply, Winston believes, and it would seem that his mind and his heart are free. Okay, so what does it mean to be free for you as an American, someone who values freedom or liberty? What does it mean to be free? Well, Winston here Winston's characterization seems to suggest that what it means to be free in the end is to have a free mind, all right, that can analyze information around you, and a free heart that can set its affections on the things that it believes to be worthy of affection, to love that which is good, to hate that which is evil, to use one's mind to understand what is true and what is false, and to live according to those observations. Okay, that's what it means to be free. All right, so the next piece of text we're going to look at is obviously part two, chapters 1 through 3. So during these chapters, Winston is just going to expand his rebellion. I'll give you a hint. It's going to move outward from simply his own mind and his own heart into other individuals, right? He's going to develop a romantic relationship with Julia, okay? He's going to develop a friendship in part two with O'Brien. He is going to join the Brotherhood, all right, of Emmanuel Goldstein, okay? He's going to expand his rebellion. This is the rising action of the narrative as we journey toward a kind of climactic moment in the novel, all right? What's our central question? How does the style of the narration in chapters 1 through 3 of part 2 expand our understanding of the significance of Winston Smith's rebellion against the party? Okay, so that's our central question. Quick recitation, all right, in chapters 1 through 3. One morning, Winston walks toward the bathroom when he's at work in the records department, all right, in the Ministry of Truth, helping the party control reality, even though he hates doing it, all right? The girl from the fiction department that he's always sort of been afraid of and noticed but also attracted to, her name is Julia, passes him a note after she falls on the ground, and the note reads, "I love you." Well, that's very weird. Okay, they don't even know each other, but alas, romantic relationships in Oceania, dating in Oceania is a little bit complicated. She passes him a note, says, "I love you." They set up a meeting where they plan an outing to the countryside where they're going to go spend some time together. Okay, in chapter 2, they meet in a place that is described very as the Golden Country, a place that Winston has been dreaming of. There, they have a sort of they have this sort of intimate encounter where they get to know each other more. Eventually, they make love to one another, and it's kind of incarnation of their rebellion. Okay, so we're going to be talking about that. We're going to have to be mature about that, obviously. Okay, so there's some sex in this chapter, but it's not just it's meant to be used by Orwell to help investigate the sort of corner of Winston's humanity and Julia's humanity that they are reclaiming here. Okay, now I understand that they're not married. It's illegal in their society for them to be married because they're attracted to each other. So it's a little bit morally convoluted here. I am certainly not endorsing extramarital sexual affairs. That's not the point here. Okay, so let's just throw that out there. All right, and then finally, in chapter 3, Winston and Julia return to their normal lives, where they continue to meet as often as they possibly can. Their relationship develops, but essentially, the dominant theme here, all right, is that Winston's rebellion is now being shared with another individual. Her name is Julia. Okay, he is beginning to actually experience a kind of romantic love or a love affair that is in direct defiance to the party's demand that the citizens of Oceania only love them. All right. Hope you guys have a great day. That's it for today.